She may be pretty, she may be smart.
Hey guys, this is Sophia and welcome to my kitchen. I know it's a little messy behind me, but you need to clean up. So I recently polled my Instagram stories asking if anyone on Instagram would want to see some of my go-to healthy recipes, and it seemed like the overwhelming response was yes. So that is why we are here. I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite healthy in quotation marks because that definition means different things to different people. So I don't want to impart my version of healthy onto you, but this is my definition of healthy. So I'm going to be sharing some breakfast, lunch, and dinner recipes. They're definitely mostly focused on dinner because I usually lump breakfast and lunch together, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of a 2 meals a day plus snacking person, mostly because I don't like spending 3 times in the day making a meal. Like that to me just feels like a waste of time. But I do like snacking, so it's always the best of both worlds for me. And if you like this video, let me know by either leaving a comment or giving this video a thumbs up, just so I know if you want to see more videos like this in the future. But otherwise, without further ado, let's just get right into it.
She may be fun.
So the first meal we're gonna make is my go-to oatmeal recipe, and it's actually pretty simple. All you need is half a cup of oats, which yep, I definitely skilled there.
Perfect for you, but so am I.
Now on this day, I wanted to add some blueberries, so I put in half a cup of blueberries and then 3/4 cup of oat milk. I realized that with blueberries, because it's a pretty watery fruit, you actually don't need as much milk, but usually you do 1 cup of milk for every half a cup of oats. And something that I always do, especially if I'm gonna be microwaving my oats, is I always let it soak for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then after it's microwaved, I let it soak another 10 to 15 minutes so it absorbs all the liquids. And now it's time for toppings. Because I already included blueberries in the actual recipe, all I did was add some granola. Sometimes I add some nuts or chia seeds or nut butter. On this day, I really just wanted granola, so I stuck with granola, and it was delicious.
But your only fault is a liar, no longer.
Now for lunch, I typically skip it because I usually have granola, but sometimes I've just done a really quick veggie wrap, which is actually inspired by Jen Im on YouTube. So what I do is depending on what kind of protein I add, I use a skillet and kind of cook it up and warm it up, and then obviously I have an actual wrap. And I always put in 2 to 3 slices of romaine lettuce just to add an extra bit of crunch, and a lot of tomatoes. I love tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes are so good. And adding onto the protein, I also included some sriracha tofu from Trader Joe's. Both of these proteins were from Trader Joe's. And by the way, this is such a delicious lunch, but I definitely added way too much protein. It was kind of hard to eat, but still so delicious. Now when it comes to dinner, I typically stick with protein and then some veggies. On this day, I was going to be using my air fryer for some chicken wings. And so before I put the chickens in the air fryer, I obviously have to soak them and marinate them. And I typically just use an all-purpose marinade that I get from my local grocery store in Chinatown. And then I'm prepping the broccoli while the chicken is marinating. And if you are a home cook and you do not own an air fryer, I really encourage you to do so. It is so much more efficient than using your oven, and I just like it. It can be bulky and definitely take up counter space, but it is so great, and I basically use my air fryer once to twice a week. I just love it so much. And while the chicken is cooking, that's when I start prepping to boil my broccoli. And I typically add 1 to 2 spoons of this chicken broth powder into the water as it's about to boil. Let it sit for a little bit and then put in the broccoli and cover it up. This cooks broccoli really quickly, but you definitely have to wash the water so it doesn't overflow the pot. Once the chicken is done / once the air fryer beeps, I always check the internal temperature of the chicken because I don't want to bite into it and then it's still raw. And usually around that time the broccoli is done too, and so I just start plating. I always add in some kimchi just for an extra little bit of spice. And now it's time for dinner, and you can see half the plate is broccoli, which is how I like it. It's my favorite vegetable, and then my boyfriend and I each get 2 chicken wings each. It is hot, so be careful, but it's delicious. The second dinner recipe I'm going to share with you is actually from Lily Sabry's recipe, but it is her Cajun shrimp avocado quinoa recipe. I'm going to leave a link to the actual recipe in the description box if you want to follow it step by step. And as I'm preparing for it, I still always add veggies, and obviously I love my broccoli, so it's always going to be broccoli. And once the quinoa is done cooking, I make sure to let it cool down for a little bit because trust me, I've put in the avocado directly once it's hot and it just, the texture is just terrible. So definitely wait until it's cooled down. And at that time, I start making the shrimp and seasoning it. I really love my garlic and onion powder, so I really add quite a bit. And Cajun seasoning is actually so good. I didn't have it before I started making this recipe, and I highly recommend that you add it. And once the shrimp is done cooking, which takes no time at all, that's when I do the avocado quinoa. And I actually add extra seasoning because I personally hate the taste of avocado by itself. And by the way, this seasoning combination makes this quinoa avocado so good. And now it's time to plate. And by the way, the broccoli is already cooking. I didn't feel like I had to film it since I filmed it last time. But basically, I just really love presentation and sectioning, and this was what the meal looked like, and it is as delicious as it looks, I promise. And I believe I was filming a day in the life on TikTok, which is why I'm filming myself eating here. For this last recipe, I'm using my air fryer again, and I'm basically making just sweet potato chunks. Here you can see me cutting up the sweet potato and then adding all my seasoning. It's very similar to the previous recipe because that's how I like to season my foods. But it's super simple, super easy. I did add this umami from Trader Joe's, which was delicious. And by the way, that chili lime seasoning is also really good. Highly recommend both of them. Once the sweet potato is seasoned, I typically start cooking and putting that in the air fryer as soon as I can because I don't know why potatoes take forever to cook. So it's usually in the air fryer. It's usually the first thing cooking before I cook anything else. And now I'm getting the pan ready and hot for the salmon. The salmon's also super easy, just like the chicken was in the previous recipe. I just put some oil on the pan, put the salmon on there, and then just douse it in this fish seafood marinade from my local Chinese grocery store. And all I do is I add extra seasoning once it's become opaque, and then I let it cook for a little bit, and once after maybe about 10 minutes, I move it off the stove and just kind of let it soak in all the juices as well as use the steam to just keep cooking it. And obviously, I am cooking broccoli right next to the salmon. When it comes to salmon, I always make sure that it's cooked. I also don't like eating raw fish, so that is why I split it in half. And now it's time to plate. Really simple, again with the sectioning and keeping the presentation nice and clean. I forgot to in front of the camera, but I swear it was delicious.
And those are the 5 recipes. Thank you so much for watching. If you make any of these recipes, please tag me on Instagram. I would love to see it. You can find me at the Sophia Lou. But yeah, I had a blast sharing these recipes, and I definitely have a few more up my sleeve. So if, like I said earlier, if you do like watching this video, let me know by liking this video or leave me a comment. And I will see you next Monday for another video. Bye.